Okay, so that's the feedback slide. So please do give me feedback. This was a last-minute introduction to the programme. I wasn't planning it, but I'm always interested in feedback. And I'm going to be talking about how to maintain and create a learning culture. So the things that I'm going to be talking about is why learning is important, what good looks like in the context of learning, and what bad looks like. And I'm going to be talking about why learning is inevitable. You can't avoid it. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. So you may as well maximize the learning opportunities. And learning is one of my own personal favorite things. And I've got a degree in maths and philosophy. I've got a master's in computation. I retrained as a high school maths teacher after 12 years of being a software engineer. So I was a software engineer for 12 years, and then I got disillusioned for various reasons and thought that software engineering wasn't for me. So I went back to my childhood dream of being a high school teacher. And I did give up on that dream when I graduated university the first time round because, and that was, I'm quite old, so that was 1991. And in 1988, there had been various changes to the education system in England. They brought in the national curriculum. Teachers weren't happy. And I knew a bunch of teachers who said to me, you don't want to be a teacher. It's not what you think. You don't get to actually teach. And so when I returned to teaching, when I finally did decide that what the hell, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to train as a high school teacher, which was quite a long time later, about 15 years later, I finally did. And I thought I was walking into it with my eyes wide open, but it was really, really, really tough. It was the hardest job I've ever done. And that's not because of the kids. I mean, yes, I wasn't very good at behavior management. I mean, but just the very fact that we call it behavior management, that's what it's called in teaching, behavior management. So it's seen as crowd control. And that's not the kids' fault. That's the fault of the education system. I did my best. I didn't manage to succeed. I gave up on a teaching career. But as part of that whole process of being at this end of the classroom and being the person doing the teaching, it made me realize how much I really appreciate learning. And I was jealous. I was jealous of them. I wanted to be one of the pupils. I wanted to be learning again. I wanted to have a teacher trying to teach me stuff, except not be a grumpy teenager at trying to learn a subject I hated, because it turns out everybody hates maths except me, or most teenagers hate maths. And I remember once, it's a really clear memory of once standing at the front of the classroom and asking them to do something, some simple exercise. One of the teenagers went, "Oh man, all you've got to do is stand there." And I was like, God, if only you knew, if only it was that simple. And if only you could appreciate the position you're in, because I really wish that I was there with people giving me exercises to do, and that's all I had to do all day. But when I got back into computing, because I didn't really have any other skills and it was the only thing I could earn a living from, so I became a software engineer again. But this time I was like, I'm going to learn stuff, and I'm going to embrace learning, and I'm going to get excited about learning, and I'm not going to be embarrassed about the fact that I don't know stuff, and I'm going to ask a million questions, and I'm just going to go hell for leather with the learning. It's all going to be about the learning. And I deliberately, because at that point I'd been out of the industry for 4 years and I didn't know I was coming back. I thought I'd given up forever. So I'd made no attempt to keep up with what was going on. And previously I'd been a desktop software developer. So I'd been working mostly in .NET, but it was all desktop software. I didn't do any web development at all. So everything was synchronous. I didn't have to do async. But when I came back into the industry, I got a job at a web development shop, and I'd never done web development before. So there was a whole bunch of stuff in there that was completely alien to me. And I'd been out of the industry for 4 years anyway. So I just got a job as an entry-level software engineer. So I got a job with a place that specialized on taking graduates on and training them up and paying them shit wages, but training them up. And the whole place was set out almost like a college. And it was a web development shop, but they had tons and tons of new graduates and this really strong focus on teaching and learning. And like, for instance, I mean, I don't agree with this, but when the CEO interviewed me, he told me in the interview that everybody in the whole company was expected to ask and answer questions. And he claimed that he had sacked people for not asking. Now that's the bit I'm like, bit extreme. It sacked people for not asking questions and also for not answering questions. That it was everybody's job to ask and answer questions. And that was what I needed, because it gave me the permission to learn and be excited about learning. And really allowed me to embrace learning. And because at that point I had done a PGCE and I'd done teacher training and I'd been a teacher for a while. So not only did I have the focus on learning, I had the focus on teaching. And I've now managed to engineer my career so that I'm basically a teacher without having to be a teacher, which is fantastic. But I'm really, really excited about teaching and learning. And I want to try and spread that to all of you, if you don't have it already. Because the thing is that there's no getting out of it, like particularly in this industry. Things are changing constantly. There are new technologies coming in all the time, exponential growth of new technologies. You've probably all seen that slide with all the millions and millions of tools that just keep getting more and more and more and more. So you cannot be an industry professional in tech without having to learn. And if there's anybody in here who was in my workshop earlier, I was trying to reassure people it's okay. You don't have to learn all the things, and you don't, because you can't, but you do have to learn some things. Yeah, like if you embrace learning, then your life will be a lot easier and more fun. But despite the fact that you can't avoid it, people do still want to avoid it, try to avoid it. So why would that be? Well, one reason is time. We're busy. We haven't got time to learn a new thing. We're busy building the current thing. The other reason is money. Training costs money. Time costs money. And the other reason is fear, because it's scary. It's scary not knowing stuff, particularly if you've been in the industry for a long time and you think that people think you're supposed to know all the things. You're not supposed to be a beginner. You're not supposed to be learning new stuff. You're supposed to just already know all the stuff. And learning new things, it makes you vulnerable because you have to admit to not knowing stuff. And that's scary. And people don't, and it's not only scary, it's not just an ego thing. It's not just that people will think, and it's not an ego thing anyway. People worry about looking bad, but it's not just that. Also, people worry about losing their jobs. People worry about having to go somewhere else and get another job. And all of that is scary. So, and having to learn new things, having to go back to square one. You know, I mean, I took a pay cut when I came back into the industry, and I could just about afford to do that. Not everybody can. People worry that if they have to go back to square one, then they'll have to take a pay cut, or they might lose their job, or whatever. There's a lot of fear. So there are a lot of reasons why people are vulnerable when it comes to learning. And you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware that people will avoid learning, but that's not just because they're idiots. You know, people have reasons for avoiding learning. So if you want to create a learning culture, you have to try and make learning appealing. The ideal is to accept learning. That's the first step. But really, you want to go further than that. You want to embrace learning. And even further than that, you want to seek learning. And you want everybody in your organization to be doing these things, because it's going to happen whether they like it or not, and it's going to happen whether you like it or not. So what does a learning culture bring to your organization? Well, I'm going to talk through a few different things that it brings. But if you have a learning culture, and what I mean by learning culture is that everybody in the organization embraces learning, is excited about learning, is facilitating learning, is helping each other to learn. That's the ideal. Why, though? What will it get you if you find yourselves in that state? Well, the first thing is innovation. You know, if people are excited about learning, then they're excited about doing new things, and they're not scared of doing new things. If you have people who are scared of learning, they're going to be scared of innovation. And then the next one is collaboration. So if people are innovating, then they're happy to take risks. If they're collaborating, then they are asking and answering questions. They're working together to learn. And if you have a learning culture, then people are more likely to collaborate. Because one of the things that stands in the way of collaboration is fear. Again, it's fear of exposing your weaknesses. It's fear of exposing your ignorance. People are scared of working. There are other reasons. This isn't the only one, but people are scared of working closely with other people because it will mean that those other people will find out what they don't know. But if you have a culture that embraces ignorance effectively by saying it's exciting when people don't know stuff because it means we get to teach them stuff and we get to learn new stuff, then people are much happier to collaborate because they're much less afraid. Another thing that a learning culture will bring you is that your people will be up to date. They're going to know what's going on, what the latest innovations are in their fields. They're not going to know all the innovations because that's impossible, but they're more likely to know what's going on because they're being encouraged to find out what's going on without fear. And then you're also going to get deep expertise. So again, if you're encouraging people to learn, then you're encouraging people to go and find out more and dig deep. If people are scared to learn, if people don't have time to learn, if people are told it's too expensive for you to learn, then they're only ever going to stay at the surface level. And for some people, that's fine. But some people, digging deep is really useful. And if you encourage learning, you're more likely to get that deep expertise. And you're also going to get a higher quality product. Because again, people aren't going to be cutting corners. People are going to be paying attention to what matters to them. They're going to be thinking about how they might be able to do things differently and not just do things the same way they've always done them. And you're more likely to get a quality product. You're also going to get a flexible workforce. So they are going to be more happy to do different things. Because if you don't encourage learning, then what tends to happen is people will get stuck with specialisms. They'll say, I'm the Ruby expert and that's my comfort zone. I'm really good at Ruby. I've been doing it for years and years and years. I know it inside out. Please don't make me do C# because I've never done it before and it's scary. I'd rather just stay in my lane. Thank you very much. But if you've got that embracing of learning, then people are much more likely to say, you know what? Okay, I'll try a new technology. I'll try a new language. I'll try doing things a different way. So people are more flexible. And this one, I mean, I've kind of already said a bunch of stuff that hints of this because I'm talking a lot about fear. I'm talking about comfort. I'm talking about creating a space where people don't worry and don't feel vulnerable. All of those things. If you're creating that environment for people, then what you're doing is you're increasing the psychological safety of the environment that they're working in, which means you're going to get much more out of them because they're not in that fear state. So for those who saw Kerry's talk yesterday, when people are in that fear state, they're much less effective. So when you can create a safe environment, they're less scared, they're more effective. And creating a safe environment for learning takes you a long way towards that. And even though I've also talked about flexibility, it also gives you stability. Because if you are confident in your ability to adapt to change, then actually you're more stable. Because you know that when the unexpected happens, which it will, that you're going to be able to deal with it, that you've quite likely anticipated it. And what that actually gives you is more stability. Okay, so what gets in the way of learning? Why wouldn't we be doing all of these wonderful things? And there are a few things that get in the way. One of them is blame. So if you have a blame culture in your organization where typically when things go wrong, somebody gets blamed, then what you have is a fearful workforce because everybody's worried that they might be the next person who's going to get blamed. If you're worried about being blamed, then you're going to do everything you can to avoid being blamed. So that means, first of all, that you avoid being honest about any mistakes that you make. So mistakes go undetected or hidden or propagated. But it also means that you're not going to admit when you might need to learn something new. You're not going to admit when you don't know things, because you're going to be worried that somebody's going to turn around and say, that was your fault because you said you didn't know about that thing. And now look, it's all gone wrong. So people have to feel confident that they can make mistakes, because you can't learn without making mistakes. You have to make mistakes in order to learn. But if you're scared of making mistakes or scared to admitting mistakes, then you're also going to be scared to learn. So blame cultures are really not great for encouraging people to learn. And another thing that doesn't encourage people to learn is elitism. Now, one of the things when I was, because I'm freelance these days, but when I was still an employed person, whenever I was looking for... Okay. Okay. Whenever I was looking for work and I was looking for potential new workplaces, one of the red flags for me was if they advertise themselves as only employing the best people. We've got a really, really complicated recruitment process. You have to jump through loads of hoops. And if you pass all the tests, that means you're one of the cream of the crop. You're the creme de la creme, and you'll be really excited and proud to come and work for us. Now, the problem with that is that everybody who does get through all of those gateways has been told that they're the creme de la creme. Okay, you'd think that they'd all feel brilliant and great and confident. But actually, they're all scared that they might lose that status and that somebody might find out that they're not the most amazing thing that ever walked the planet, because nobody is, and most people know they're not. And they're also going to be constantly kind of comparing themselves with other people and wanting to kind of hold on to the top spot, wanting to hold on to that status, and therefore actually quite insecure and quite worried about admitting mistakes or ignorance, or admitting that there might be gaps in their knowledge, or that there might be things that they want to learn because they know everything, right? Because that's why we hired them. So if you've got that idea that some people are better than others, and typically what happens in those organizations is, even if they say we've hired only the best people, you still get a pecking order within the organization. These are the best of the best. And everybody's just constantly in competition with each other and not able to admit when they need help. Not able to admit when there are gaps in their knowledge, not able to admit when they need to learn stuff. So if you've got an idea of like, some people are rock stars, some people are the best, some people are amazing, then all you're saying is that everybody else isn't. And then everybody's worried either about maintaining that status or not being able to achieve that status because somebody might have spotted that there's something they didn't know. So elitism is really not helpful. Now, laughter, you might, if you've already looked at the slide and spotted that one, you might be thinking, what? Are we not allowed to laugh anymore? You're absolutely allowed to laugh. Laughter's really important. So what I'm talking about here is mocking laughter. So this is the kind of laughter when you laugh at people for not knowing stuff. And I've lost count of the amount of times when I have overheard colleagues saying, oh my God, I just found out that Jimmy doesn't know about X. Can you believe it? Or they come out of an interview, they've just interviewed a candidate and, oh my God, we just interviewed this software developer and they'd never heard of Y. That's crazy, isn't it? And they're laughing at somebody for not knowing stuff. Even if the person they're laughing at is not present to hear the laughter, everybody else is thinking, well, I better make sure it's not me. I better make sure they're not saying that about me. So then if somebody in the room is thinking, but I don't know what X is either. Well, I don't know what I don't mean Twitter, by the way. I'm just using variables because I'm a mathematician. But I don't know what that is either. And now I can't possibly admit that I don't know what that thing is. And there are all these other things I don't know. I'd better not admit that either, because then they'll be saying that about me. They'll be laughing behind my back saying, oh my God, did you imagine? Claire's never heard of Ruby. So if we laugh at people for not knowing stuff, all we do is make them much less likely to admit when they don't know stuff, which means that they won't tell us when they need to learn, which means they won't embrace learning, they won't seek learning. Laughing at people for not knowing stuff, really bad idea. And then another thing that gets in the way of a good learning culture is impatience, is when people are moving slowly because they're learning things or because they don't know stuff. And we're like, come on, move faster. You haven't got time. And there's a whole bunch of really useful research about how moving slowly is actually more effective. You can get more done because you make fewer mistakes. You give yourself time to think about what you're doing. It's really, really easy to forget that we work in a thinking industry. And thinking is not a thing that you can have races in. I mean, you kind of can, but it's not a good idea. Thinking is something that needs space and time. So being impatient doesn't help people to learn. And then the other one, I'm sure we've all encountered this, is just like blind deadlines. So we've got to have this thing done by that date. Nobody even really knows why. Somebody picked it randomly at some point, but now the whole marketing department's leapt on it and we just have to have it done by then. And it's like, yeah, but we can't really very easily get it done by then. Well, you've just got to. But I need to find out about, no time. So deadlines really get in the way of learning. Blind deadlines that haven't really been thought through, that don't really make sense. I mean, there's going to be deadlines. You can't avoid them altogether, but they often don't have to be there. And they often do really stand in the way of quality and in the way of learning. And then there's no flexibility. So again, if you can have individuals who find themselves siloing themselves by saying, this is my specialism, this is my comfort zone, I'm just going to keep doing this because I know I can do this. But it also can happen on a team-wide basis, on a company-wide basis. We're just going to do it this way. We're going to use this technology. We're going to do this thing because this is the way we've always done it. And we feel more comfortable that way. And if we did anything else, we'd have to learn some stuff and we haven't got time. So if you don't have flexibility, then again, you're not making room for people to learn new things. And then there's denial. So this is where people just won't admit that people need to learn stuff. This is really common. You probably all experienced this. And it happens both in organizations that have official time set aside for learning and those that don't. It's like, well, we're just going to pretend that we don't need to learn this new thing. And we're just going to go steamrolling through, despite the fact that clearly there's an element here that we need to learn about. We're just going to pretend that's not true. Just going to go steaming through and just stick our fingers in our ears and hope that everything's going to be okay. And it's probably not. Learning makes such a huge difference. And then there's complacency. It's, I'll be all right. We don't need to learn new stuff. We don't need our engineers to learn new stuff. We don't need to create the space for them to learn new stuff. It's going to be fine. It probably isn't. So, okay, let's say that we've managed to overcome some of those blockers and we've agreed that we want a learning culture, that we're going to celebrate learning, we're going to facilitate learning, we're going to encourage learning. How? How are we going to do it? So, first of all, when and where are we going to do it? I am a massive fan of 20% time. It's really rare. I have worked places that have had it, and I've worked places that have had it and then got rid of it, because it's very difficult for people to believe and understand that it's valuable. Because what they see is, oh my God, 20% of everybody's time is spent doing nothing. They're not being productive. They're not meeting that deadline. So 10% is more common than 20%, and 10% is a gateway drug. It's a good way to start. For those who struggle with the maths, 10% is half a day in a 5-day week. 20% is 1 day in a 5-day week. So if you do 10%, you could, for instance, say that everybody downs tools on a Wednesday afternoon. I've seen it done on a Friday afternoon. Don't like it, to be honest, because everybody it's nearly the weekend and it's very difficult for people to find the energy and excitement for learning when they could just kind of knock off early. So ideally not Friday afternoon. But if that's all you can get, that's better than nothing. But when you give people dedicated time for learning and you say that's what that chunk of time is for, then you're giving them permission to learn. It's not totally simple. So what you will tend to find is that people generally split into two categories. There are people who just get really excited when you say, we're going to give you 10% of your working week is dedicated to learning. They're like, yay! Now I can go and learn all those millions of things that I've been dying to learn for ages. And off they go, and you can't stop them. But there's also a significant, I haven't measured it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 50-50. There's a significant number of people who are just like, but I don't know what to learn, and I don't know how to learn. And if you just say to them, whatever you like, some people will restrict it. They'll say you have to learn something that's absolutely very, very clearly tied to whatever the work you're doing is at the moment. I would say no need to do that. Just the fact of encouraging learning will mean that people will learn stuff that is useful and relevant, even if it isn't immediately apparent that that's the case. And you're also creating this culture, which in itself breathes life into everything. But some people will just go, but I don't know what, and I don't know how, and this is just scary and difficult, particularly those who are afraid of learning. And that's a significant number of people, but not only those people. Some people just need structure. And so what you can do is you can give people options. So you can say, there are so many different ways of doing it. It could be Wednesday afternoon for the whole company. It could be everybody can decide when their own 10% or 20% is. You can let them roll it up if they want to. You're going to work this out in your own organization. But you can say either you can just use your budget in whatever way, or use this learning platform that we've got, or whatever, or use these resources that we've purchased and just go off and do your own thing. Or we'll set up structured activities for you. We'll give you a playbook. You can choose between different learning journeys. You can choose between different learning activities. One great thing you can do is that you can set up an ensemble or mod programming session at regular intervals that people can join if they want, or they can pair with other people, or they can do a workshop, or people can deliver workshops to each other. But giving people a choice of either being independent or having it highly structured is a very good idea. And then academies. Now, this is something that's particularly close to my heart because I ran the Made Tech Academy for a couple of years, and I taught it. Made Tech, unfortunately, no, they do still have an academy, but it's differently structured now. But when I was running it, what we were doing was we were taking on a cohort of, and the numbers varied. I think the smallest I did was 6 and the largest was 22. Brand new engineers. So a lot of them had never had a job as an engineer before. They'd done boot camps. They had to have done some learning. That's a whole other talk. So I'm not going to tell you how to set up an academy. But anyway, we were taking people who were very new to the industry, and we were training them for 12 weeks. So it was effectively an internal boot camp, and it was full time. We paid them, and then they got a job at the end. And it is, as soon as I say full time for 12 weeks, paying them, and they're not actually working on a project, a lot of people go, no, that sounds very expensive. It is expensive, but it is a massive investment, and a very good investment. It pays off because what you get in return is people who do things the way you like to have them done. You can indoctrinate them. You can teach them how to build things in the way that you like to build things. So we because of the way that we like to do things, was using XP practices and Agile practices and test-driven development and pair programming. We could teach these people to embrace all of that. We could also teach them to be highly collaborative. So they've gone on this journey together. They're learning together. And then they also go out and work together. And they seed the teams that they go to with these highly collaborative working techniques, with everything that they've learned. And they are so passionate, so energetic, particularly because they're new to the industry. So it's all new and exciting for them. And you've just taught them, and you've just hothoused them in this beautifully concentrated learning environment. And then you're sending them out into the rest of the company with this love of learning, which then infects the whole of the rest of the company. It's very powerful. It is an investment, but it's very powerful. Apprenticeships. So actually, I don't work for Made Tech anymore, but they are now running apprenticeships. We weren't doing that when I was there because it takes a bit of time to set up. And there's two kinds of apprenticeships. There's official government sanctioned apprenticeships, which is what Made Tech are now doing. Or you can just call it an apprenticeship. It doesn't have to have, fulfill any criteria. If you do official government sanctioned apprenticeships, there are a lot of hoops to jump through, which is why we weren't doing it when I was there. And it can be a bit restrictive. But the idea of bringing people in and teaching them on the job with or without the aid of government funding is a really powerful idea. And then there's classroom courses. So when I say classroom courses, what I mean is somebody effectively goes and sits in a classroom and learns something. Now, a classroom might be a virtual classroom. It might just be a room in your building. I would suggest caution for this kind of thing, because the problem with classroom courses is they tend to be quite abstract. They're not related to what people are doing day to day, hands-on. And it's very, very common. I bet there's at least one person in fact, I'm going to ask a question. How many people in this room have done a course, learnt a thing, and then never used it again? Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. That felt like most of the room. So that's why you have to be really careful about, and of what's infuriating for me as a provider of training and learning is that most companies, they're really rigid about training budget, and they're really unimaginative. And they're like, we have a training budget. What are we going to do with it? Oh, we'll buy a course, and we'll send people on a course. And that's really simple and easy. And we've done it many times before, and we can see where the money's going, and it's like, bump, 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 done, easy. And then we can forget about it. And then not pay any attention to the fact that these people never use that skill again. So it's much harder. So what I do is I go in to companies and I work with software engineers directly hands-on with their own code bases. So I'm a technical coach. I'm teaching people skills on the job. It's really hard to persuade people to pay for that. It's very annoying because it's like, we just want to buy a training course. It's like, that's just too confusing. We don't understand that. But it's so much more effective if people learn on the job. So classroom courses can be good, but be careful. As and when courses are something that I really love. So this is when you can. So one of the things that I've done as a technical lead working with teams is if I'm working with a team and that we identify a tool or a technology that we all need to learn, then I just say, right, okay, let's take a day out and we'll all do it together. And I've done that when I wasn't in a position to teach whatever it was, where I was learning too. But I was just say, right, well, let's go and find some learning resources and let's work through it together in an ensemble. So effectively like mob programming, mob learning. And you can do that at the drop of a hat. If you have a learning culture, if you agree and accept that learning is important and it's okay to prioritize time for that kind of thing. There are other ways of doing that as well. So you can have on-demand courses, you can have video courses that people can either do on their own time, or, and when I say on their own time, I mean on the company time. You're paying them to do this, but in a time of their choosing. People can do that on their own. They can do that with other people. Learning with other people is much more effective than learning on your own. So it's a really nice idea to pair up with people or to create groups of people. But, you have to allow people a certain amount of agency with that kind of thing. And then there are, I don't know why that slide moved on when it wasn't ready, and there's something wrong with the transition. So imagine that the thing saying workshops is now highlighted in blue. So you can also run workshops. You can buy in workshops from providers. You can run your own workshops. So actually, another plug. In fact, I think that's what went wrong, because the next slide, I'll just show you the next slide. Maybe that's why it's doing that. Anyway, right. So this is the Saman Technical Coaching Society. So Emily Bache founded the Saman Technical Coaching Society. This is the book that she wrote about the Saman method of technical coaching. And I'm a member of the Samman Technical Coaching Society. I am a Samman Technical Coach. And one of the things that Emily has done, one of the amazing things that Emily has done, is she's created teaching resources that people can use to run their own workshops without having to develop the resources themselves. Some of those resources, like the basic resources, are available free to use. You can buy a kind of extra add-on stuff for a little bit of money. But it means that you can deliver workshops in-house around techniques such as incremental refactoring, test-driven development, continuous integration, using materials that are already available for you. So there are lots of different ways you can get people to deliver workshops for you. You can get your own people to deliver workshops. You will have people who have an aptitude for developing and delivering their own workshops, which is something really good thing to encourage. You'll have people who would rather not do that, would rather use somebody else's resources. You know, work with what you've got. But workshops make a really big difference. Oh, there you go. Now we get to workshops. I've talked about workshops now. Okay. So as well as all of the things that I've already mentioned, and I've kind of touched on this, there's also just learning on the job. So this is where, as I've mentioned, as a technical coach, I will go in and work with teams on their own code bases. Typically what I'll do is we'll find an area of a code base that needs refactoring and that isn't mission critical. And then we'll do it together over a series of sessions. That's one way of learning on the job. Another way of learning on the job is simply for, it's quite likely that you'll identify within your team that you need to use a new technology or you want to explore adding something new. And these days, probably going to be something to do with AI. Maybe the team want to explore AI, but this is something that they can do together on the job, on the code base. So they can test out the stuff that they're learning on the actual code base in a real context. And that's so powerful, particularly when people do it together and when they help each other. So, but there are different ways of doing this. One way is simply pairing, just pairing anyway. So if people are pairing on what they're doing, and that doesn't just apply to developers, anybody who does a job can probably pair. I mean, I'm sure there are jobs where it's harder. But people can do things together with other people. And what happens then is that they learn from each other just naturally. One of the things that puts people off pairing is that they worry that their own weaknesses, ignorances, gaps will be exposed. And it was certainly what put me off the first time I thought about it. It was like, oh my God, no. They'll find out how little I know. Okay. But actually what happened was I found out that they didn't know stuff too. So it ended up being really empowering because they're Googling all the time as well. It's not just me. I've actually talked about ad hoc workshops effectively. So this is where you just say, right, let's all down tools and learn a thing together. I'm speeding through now because I'm running out of time. Lunch and learn. So this is where you encourage people to present information to each other. Might be on a lunchtime, might not be on a lunchtime, but you set time aside, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. So in the academy, we used to encourage people to present information, and they would go, "Oh no, but what are we going to talk about?" And I said, "I don't care. You can tell me, you might know a lot about knitting. Tell us about knitting. You might know loads about alpacas. Tell us about alpacas." And then we did two because that was the big cohort. That's when we had 22 people. And we did two every Friday. They were really short. It was like 5 or 10 minutes. And I would ask for 2 volunteers every Friday. And if I didn't get volunteers, I'd have to pick names out of a hat. But the very first one I ran, I was like, okay, I want volunteers. And the very first 2 that we had, one of them was about alpacas and the other one was about knitting. Turned out that we had somebody in the cohort who knew a lot about knitting, and we had somebody who knew a lot about alpacas. And it was fantastic. And the point is that you're encouraging people to share knowledge and be excited about knowledge. It doesn't matter what the knowledge is. Mob programming I've talked about, where everybody works together on the same piece of work. That transition's, maybe that transition isn't broken. Oh, maybe this was the point. I put this slide in here so that I could talk about mobbing. Okay, fair enough. So this, there is, I've got a quote here from Kent Beck, who was talking about Salmon technical coaching. He said, walking a new path together along with an experienced guide reduces time spent not learning because of fear. And one of the things that we do with Salmon is that we will facilitate mob programming. Tech time is something that I always used to do as a tech lead, that I would set time aside every week for us to talk about technical issues that we've come up against, new things that we've learned, that you just got a dedicated hour a week where the team comes together and tells each other about cool things they've learned in the previous week. A deep dive, this is where you encourage people learning on the job. So what you can do is if you're learning a new technology, you can deep dive and apply it at the same time on a particular area of whatever you're doing. Retros are a really good way of learning on the job, of actually identifying where the problems are and talking about it and thinking about what you can do about it and being open about it, creating a safe environment. And then another really great thing that I like to do, again, as a technical lead is that, and I do this as a coach as well, is every time I come across something cool in the code base, I make a note of it. It might be something I've done. It might be something a colleague's done. I make a note of it. I bring it up in the next tech time. Look at this cool thing. Look at how this works. And I might also, identify problem areas, as long as I'm really careful that I'm not attaching blame to that, and that I've got some kind of practical approach to doing something about it. So how do we create a learning culture? We have to recognize all the different ways that you can learn. You can learn by doing, you can learn by giving feedback, you can learn by collaborating, sharing. Being trusted makes a huge difference if you trust people to learn. And not just tech, learn other things as well and have fun while learning. It doesn't have to all be serious and boring. So gamifying, that's been a theme I ran a workshop this morning where it was gamified. You can make learning fun. You can encourage people to laugh and encourage people to teach each other, because the highest form of learning is teaching. I will deliberately look for opportunities to teach things that I'm learning because I know that will deepen my own learning. Pay attention to any data that you have. Learn from data. So, that's a whole other topic, so I'm not going to go into that. Encourage people to make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes. Celebrate mistakes as an opportunity to learn. And encourage people to take ownership of their learning as well. So it doesn't have to be imposed on them from above. Because the range of knowledge in our industry is very wide. It's really, really, really big. And how are we doing for time? 3 minutes. I'm going to race through this. So this, if you haven't seen this slide before, that's me at the bottom. These are all my colleagues talking about all of those topics. And I'm thinking, but all of those people know all of those things. What I'm not taking account of is that everybody's thinking the same thing. So Andy's looking at all of the people who apparently know all of the things, and he's saying, oh no, but so is Anik, and so is Ezra, and so is poor Georgia. If you're wondering where these pictures come from, I went round my colleagues and asked them at a social event and asked them to pose for me, looking happy and confident and confused and upset. So Ileana has the same problem, and so does John, and so does Kirsty, and so does Mircea, and so does Rob, and so does Scott. Everybody's looking at everybody else and thinking all of those people know all of those things and I don't. But actually we're all in the same boat. And if you haven't come across the idea of the lucky 10,000, this is the idea that every day 10,000 people are learning a new thing. And rather than scorning them for not knowing the thing, and the example in the cartoon is the Diet Coke and Mentos thing, instead of laughing at them, oh my God, how can you not know that thing? He does some spurious maths and calculates that 10,000 people a day are learning the new thing. So if you meet somebody who doesn't know a thing, instead of laughing at them for not knowing the thing, you go, yay, you're one of today's lucky 10,000. And I get to come with you on this journey while you learn the thing. So the example is Diet Coke and Mentos, which if you put them together, create an amazing fountain. If you laugh at somebody for not knowing it, you miss out on the opportunity to show it to them and share their delight. So Learning enablers, no blame, tools and data, questions, exploration, give people time, freedom, empathy to learn, and encourage diversity, because that also really helps learning. This is the Stupidity Manifesto, which I encourage people to sign, share with their teams, explicitly sign up to, print out, put on the wall. And this is all about encouraging learning and not making each other feel stupid. And I will leave that on the screen and call that the end. And we might have time for like one question.